If you are thinking about starting a YouTube channel or a podcast, and there has never been a better opportunity for you to become the media than there is right now. People are moving away from traditional media and celebrities and moving towards relatable voices. So grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. Like most of the world, I have been glued to the US presidential election because a lot of what happens in a country as significant as the US flows into countries like mine in Australia and really affects a lot of the rest of the world. And importantly, an event as significant as the US presidential election really brings to light what some of the latest trends and sentiments are in the general population. So, if you found that perhaps the seemingly tight race was a surprise in terms of how conclusive the results appeared to be, then you may have been missing one of the biggest shifts that is happening in the media and communication landscapes. So, whether you are thinking about starting a blog or a podcast, no matter what the topic or your interests, whether it is a hobby, whether it's a lifestyle, or anything that you want to be talking about or building a community around, the recent trends that we have seen in that space indicates that there is no better time for you to be doing that than now, because people are shifting towards wanting to move away from the really big conventional voices that they may have been used to in a previous time in history, but now want to connect with people that feel more like everyday people. So let's break down what is happening in this trend. So let's start with chapter number 1 of this breakdown, and that is that traditional media is dying. And that's not designed to be some hyperbolic statement, but is actually supported by some of the later stats. A poll that was conducted by Gallup in the US indicated that for consecutive years now, the participants in the poll have indicated that they have record low trust in the media to report on the news accurately. And now, for 3 consecutive years, more people have indicated that they have no trust at all in the media, or not a great amount of trust in the media, than those people that indicated that they had a great deal or a fair amount of trust in the media. When these polls first began in the 70s, trust would sit between the 60s and the 70% range. Then by the early 2000s, this was falling to the 50s range. So we can see this continue to decline over time. The relevance of the traditional legacy media, due to the onset of so many other opportunities to hear other voices, has made those outlets a little bit more irrelevant to the modern consumer. And again, this is not something that I am saying to be dramatic, but it's actually something that the biggest players in the world have noticed. They have noticed a seismic shift in the communication and media landscape. For example, Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon and also the owner of the Washington Post, recently published an op-ed titled "The Hard Truth: Americans Don't Trust the Media." And in it he said, "Our profession is now the least trusted of all. Something we are doing is clearly not working." He also said it would be easy to blame others for our long and continuing fall in credibility, and therefore decline in impact. But a victim mentality will not help. Complaining is not a strategy. He said the Washington Post and the New York Times win prizes, but increasingly we talk only to a certain elite. More and more we talk to ourselves. And that brings me to topic number 2, which is that celebrities have lost their influence. I talked about this a few months ago in a previous episode, and I broke down why that is the case. But to summarize, let's look back at the presidential election campaign. You may be aware that following the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, shortly after this, Taylor Swift, perhaps one of the biggest brands in the world, one of the biggest personal brands in the world, a household name, came out online and endorsed Kamala Harris. And at the time, a lot of people thought that this was such a significant event in the campaign and it would have such an influence on people's voting decisions. But a poll later showed that 81% of people said that Taylor Swift's endorsement didn't actually influence their voting decision. And 6% only said that it actually made them more inclined to want to vote for Kamala Harris. And 13% said that Taylor Swift's endorsement made them less likely to back the Democratic ticket. So it might have even had a detrimental effect on the campaign. And if you were paying attention to any of the campaign, you may have noticed that the use of celebrities was a key focus for the Democratic strategy. They had a star-studded lineup of celebrities as a part of their election campaign, their events for endorsements, and just some of them included really big household names like Beyonce, Eminem, J-Lo, Leonardo DiCaprio, LeBron James, Steph Curry. There was so many people that came out to endorse the Democratic candidate in Kamala Harris. So when you had such a significant group of people who, keep in mind, just some of the biggest names in that group alone would have a combined following of close to 1 billion people, and that the Harris campaign had a $1 billion budget to match as well. Why was it that they weren't able to move the needle in a more significant way? And that is because just because your personal brand might be famous, it doesn't actually mean that it is influential. Influential means that you are more likely going to be able to persuade people's decision making. You have an impact on the way that they might behave. And while we might love to watch celebrities on TV, to see them in movies, we might love their latest songs, we might love their outfits, we might love, the look of their skin and want to know what it is that they're using, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have an interest in their values and their interests and their opinions. So if we're not being influenced by celebrities, then who are we being influenced by? And that's where it comes down to more relatable voices, which brings me to my next chapter, and that is You Are the Media. In the book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, Ravikant is quoted as saying, "Code and media are permissionless leverage. They're the leverage behind the newly rich. You can create software and media that works for you while you sleep. If you can't code, write books and blogs, record videos and podcasts." When you have a platform for your personal brand, then it means that instead of chasing the media for any sort of exposure for your message, you actually become the media. This is something that Sarah McCorkadale breaks down beautifully in her book, Influence, and she talks about how influencer brands are truly changing the world. She says that while they might not like to necessarily be called influencers, the power of influencers is that broadly they believe their value lies in their ability to build communities through consistent, relatable, authoritative, and regular content. And this is the difference between people that have generated some level of fame versus people that have generated influence. They have turned the attention that they have received for their personal brand into a community, and they've become the media as a result. McCorkadale says the word influencer is symbolic of a new kind of media mogul, one who is independent, industrious, and has capitalized on their online popularity to launch further creative projects and successful startups. So how do you start to potentially build that influence, to create a community, to share your interests and messages that you're passionate about? That is where the power of podcasters comes in. You may have heard that podcasting is said to have played a significant role in the presidential election campaign and the results of that campaign. And Donald Trump's son, Barron Trump, is said to have played a significant role in that strategy. He encouraged his father to go on to these popular podcasts in areas that he wanted to make headway in. And a lot of these required a significant investment of time. For example, he sat down for 3 hours with Joe Rogan, the biggest podcast in the world. But just booking a spot on a top podcast isn't enough to have people be persuaded by your opinions. But particularly long form content and settings like that allows you to showcase more of your personality in a relatable way. It means that people can connect with you on a deeper level that just isn't possible in the traditional media format, where you may only have a few minutes at best to be able to connect with your audience. But when you sit down in a long form podcast, and if you're hosting the podcast and you are doing that week after week, then your audience has a chance to really connect with you, to feel like you are a friend, and to feel like your opinions are actually something that might matter to them. So let's go back to McCorkadale's book, An Influence, and talk about what differentiates the influencer brands with celebrity brands. And I think she summarizes this beautifully when she says, like celebrities, their followers, their fans aspire to their lifestyle, but unlike celebrities, their lives are presented as relatable and achievable. She also says, like traditional media, they share information. Unlike traditional media, it is all from a personal perspective. McCorkadale breaks this down beautifully in a Venn diagram where she shows a circle for media, a circle for celebrities, and the point of overlap being where influencers sit. So take someone like Joe Rogan, for example. He doesn't pretend to be an expert in anything. His podcast is designed to engage with other experts, to create expertise by association in a way. But the reason that people are influenced by him is that he has done that in such a relatable way for such a consistent amount of time as well. So when people like Joe Rogan come out and endorse a presidential candidate, it comes across as more genuine, more relatable, and something that the community that he has built around him is more likely going to pay attention to. It's worth also keeping in mind that some of the biggest podcasts in the world, or perhaps in your country, aren't even household names. But these are people that have built a community around their personal brand, around their ideas, around their messages. They might have had success in another area and then converted that into a personal brand. Or they might have built their personal brand entirely from scratch online. But either way, this latest turn of events really shows that the power of media is shifting to the people. So now let's get into a particular type of influencer that is starting to emerge more and more, and that is the expert influencer. Not all celebrity brands are created equal, and there was one endorsement that people on the right side of the US presidential campaign will tell you marked a very significant turning point for the momentum of that campaign, and that was the endorsement from Elon Musk. Elon Musk obviously is a household name. He owns 6 companies and he has a significant personal brand online as well. But the reason why people paid attention when Elon Musk endorsed Donald Trump, when most of the celebrity world or the big names wouldn't, was because he has built a community around his personal brand. He didn't just come out and express his opinion just aligned to that particular campaign. He's been doing this online for years now. People have become accustomed to understanding what his values and his opinions and his key messages are. So when he provides an endorsement for a particular candidate, they understand that that is coming from a particular place and they want to know more about where that's coming from. And this is where the power of the expert influencer comes into play. Someone like Elon Musk, who has had the background that he has had, is not only a celebrity name to people, but someone whose history that people feel like in some way they can trust, and they want to know why he put his trust into a candidate like Donald Trump. But if we are talking about new media, we cannot go past the significant momentum that YouTube is gaining and the opportunity that is available to everyday people to have a place on the platform. It's never been more appealing. Earlier this year, it was revealed that YouTube had broken the 10% barrier in overall TV viewing. It was the first time that any streaming platform had done this. To stay with this theme, let's take a look at the US presidential campaign election day. 82 million people are said to have tuned into streaming platforms on that day, and 80% of this was through YouTube. 42 million people are said to have tuned into traditional TV networks, and I believe this was across 18 different networks. So you can see the significance of YouTube in that landscape. Research has also shown that for 50% of people, when they switch on their smart TVs, the first app that they open is the YouTube app. But the best thing about YouTube is that it is available to almost anyone who has access to a smartphone to make content on the platform. So if you are sitting on the fence about whether or not you want to create your YouTube channel or create a podcast, then take this as an opportunity to see this as your push towards those things, because it's never been a more exciting time than it is now to actually become the media. For more like this, check out my previous episode on the new rich. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.